UFC Vegas 54. Draftkings has released the salary so we could take our first look. You can call me Kunith. Let's make some money this week. Last week we had a good week. We called a lot of things that happened. Our cash game lineup on Twitter slapped every contest that it was in. Something that these bigger channels would never do for you because they can't. On top of that, in the final picks video, I gave you 8 bets that I think you should take. 7 of them hit. The only one that didn't hit was Charles Oliveira by knockout, and we were this close. So if you took those bets, you made your cash game lineup, you're in a good spot coming into this week. But I know, unfortunately, a lot of you guys lost in your tournaments because the UFC and DraftKings, again, don't want to tell us about when fights are getting canceled. Cowboy Cerrone gets food poisoning, and we don't find out till 6 p.m., and the fight card starts at 5:30. Absolute garbage. UFC needs to notify fans sooner. DraftKings needs to notify fans sooner. I don't know if Cowboy released any kind of statement prior to, but if he did, I didn't see it. And this has been happening week in and week out, and it's getting a little ridiculous because it's crushing people's lineups. I had Cowboy in my GPP, and I still cashed because so many people took him or Lozon. But regardless, again, we had a really good week with the straight bets, with the cash games. I will be putting my cash game lineup on Twitter. Follow me at Kunith MMA so that you can cash out as well. But enough chit chat, enough jibber jabber. Let's get into the breakdown. At the top of the slate, we have Nick Maximov. He's at 9,300. He's fighting Andrea Petrovsky this week. Nick Maximov is a huge favorite this week, and I can tell you now that the line is pretty wide here. I think this fight is closer than what the line is indicating. Maximov is a great wrestler. We saw that in his last fight where he secured 11 takedowns against Punahele Soriano. He got 4 takedowns and almost 2 whole rounds of control time here against Cody Brundage. And they don't show it here on DraftKings, but in his Contender Series fight, he got 2 takedowns with over 11 minutes of control time there as well. So if he wins, he has a really high scoring ceiling for sure, but there is some data that I can't ignore here. He throws less than 2 strikes per minute and has a 39% striking defense, so his output is poor, and you can argue, well, that's a result of all the wrestling. Fair point. However, if we look at his takedowns plus his control time, we find that in 3 fights, he's gotten 17 takedowns in just under a half of an hour of control time with only 1 submission attempt. And that's significant because on the other side, we have Andrea Petrovsky, who has a 100% finish rate. He's constantly looking for submissions and sweeps to improve his position, and he throws bombs on the feet. And we've seen up until this point, Nick Maximov can't strike. So I can honestly see this fight going one of 2 ways. We have Nick Maximov being a wet blanket, grinding out a decision win, securing 6 or more takedowns, or he gets clubbed and subbed by the much more dangerous fighter here in Petroski. And this is interesting to me because this looks like a situation where no matter who wins this fight, it's going to be complete one-way traffic one way or the other. I don't think we're going to have a back and forth contest. I think one side of this is absolutely going to dominate the other. And I know the line is wide. I know that if you listen to other people, they'll say, oh, Nick Maximov's going to rag him, whatever. But at the same time, I really can't ignore how dangerous Petroski is. He's going to have a big striking advantage. He has the more diverse skill set all around. I'm going to pick Andrea Petrovsky to win this fight inside the distance, and he makes a lot of things work with your lineup. Now, again, it could totally go the other way. Nick Maximov could totally end up scoring 120 points, getting a bunch of takedowns and control time. We know Petroski likes to jump on guillotines, which is pretty low percentage. But at the same time, I do think that he's the most dangerous grappler that Nick Maximov has come up against. And again, that striking advantage, I really can't ignore it. So proceed with caution, but honestly, this card looks real thin when it comes to underdogs. I like Andrea Petrovsky at his price. He's going to be way different, way under-owned. I might have him in my lineups. My mind can change later in the week, of course, but for right now, Andrea Petrovsky, 6,900 inside the distance. Next at 9,100, we have Davey Grant. He's fighting Louis Smolka this week, and this should be easy work for Davey Grant. Louis Smolka hasn't looked good in a very long time. He was cut from the UFC not too long ago, but he hasn't looked good in his return. And Davey Grant, for the last few years, has been fighting at his absolute best. So I really like him in this spot. I'm very confident that we see a knockout from him as well. Grant should be much faster. He hits harder, and on the ground, we can expect Smolka to make mistakes and provide openings for Grant to find submissions. submissions, and at the very least find himself in a dominant position on top, probably start laying down some ground and pound and finding the finish that way. He's definitely one of my more confident picks of the week, and the last thing that I'll say about this is if you look at his recent fights, he's fought the likes of John Martinez, Marlon Vera, Andre Yanez, so at his current form, this looks like a step down in competition for him, and I expect it to look that way on Saturday. So the pick for this fight is Dangerous Davey Grant inside the distance. I'm going to say knockout inside of the first 2 rounds. He's going to be super popular on DraftKings, obviously, just because of the matchup, but I think you need to get there. I'm definitely going to have him in my lineups, I could assure you of that. Next, we have the fight with Tatsuro Taira. He's going to be fighting Carlos Candelario this week. This is a fight that we've already broken down, so I'll try to keep this brief for you. Both these guys are making their debut. Tatsuro's 10-0 as a pro, 9-0 as an amateur, and he's fought some actually really experienced guys over in Japan. And side by side, his resume looks a lot stronger than Candelario's, who was in a really greasy fight with Victor Altamirano, who is not all that good. We saw that in his UFC debut. And Tatsuro's coming in with an 80% finish rate as a pro, and if you watch his fights, it's pretty obvious as to why. He's got big power for the division. He aggressively is looking for submissions, and I think that he's going to be the better athlete with the better gas tank here in this spot. I do think that he finds a submission at some point. I think that he ends up taking Candelario's back probably in the 2nd or 3rd round. And like we talked about the first time we broke this down, this guy has the potential to be a superstar. He's very young. He's fighting out of a place where we don't get many fighters in the UFC, that is. So it looks like the UFC is feeding Tatsuro a little Candelario soup, if you will. Friendly matchmaking, like somebody like Sean O'Malley, Paddy Pimblett, these guys are going to receive this kind of treatment. I expect Tatsuro's next 3 fights to be against guys that are either just making their debut or haven't really shown much in the UFC because they're looking to build up this prospect. But the pick for me in this fight is Tatsuro Taira inside the distance. And I know I said a moment ago that Davey Grant is probably going to come in at really high ownership because of the matchup. But if you take a step back and you think about it, Tatsuro's going to come in at super high ownership, especially because people wanted to play him before and now they're going to have the chance to play him. You've got Nick Maximov that everybody's going to want to play because of the high ceiling. And you have our next fighter in Iwan Cutelaba, who's going to come in at high ownership because of his high finishing upside. So Davey Grant might fly under the radar a little bit this week because you can't play all these guys. Cutelaba is going to be fighting Ryan Spann this week, and I really want to bet against Cutelaba because he makes boneheaded decisions. We've seen that in the past, but he's fighting another bonehead in Ryan Spann, so it's hard for me to do that. Ryan Spann has looked slow, lethargic, almost lazy in the octagon, and he doesn't make the best decisions. He's got relatively low fight IQ. Cutelaba has a tendency to be a bit wild, which normally that's not something you want to see out of a fighter that you're backing. Normally, if you're backing somebody, you want them to be technical and precise in the UFC, because if you're swinging crazy at the highest level with looping hooks, it's really not a good thing.
Right hand from the champion.
But that kind of style, that forward pressure, coupled with the wrestling, could really overwhelm Ryan Spann, which is why I like Cutelaba this week. And to touch on the takedowns again, Cutelaba has got 17 takedowns total in his last 2 fights, and he's averaging nearly 5 takedowns per 15 minutes. Ryan Spann tends to get backed up and will fatigue the later this fight goes. So I see Cutelaba winning a decision here with some takedowns mixed in. Obviously, he has big power, so he could find the finish as well, but from a DraftKings perspective, I think this is an easy fade. The reason why I say it's an easy fade is just like last week, we sniffed out that Randy Brown and Chaos Williams fight going the distance and being way overowned, and that happened, and the fighter that won didn't get 1 takedown, didn't get 1 knockdown, so the winner of that fight didn't score all that well. I think the same logic applies here. I think we could totally see a situation where Iwan Cutelaba wins a decision and only scores 90 points. And that's not going to be enough when you've got guys like Tatsuro, got Davey Grant, and the potential for Nick Maximov to go off. So maybe a surprise to some of you, but Iwan Cutelaba by decision is the pick for this fight. And if you haven't already, make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel, because if you haven't subscribed yet, what are you doing? And also comment something for the algorithm because, well, you know how the algorithm works. Next at 8,700, we have Aleksandar Rakic. He's our main event favorite against Jan Blachowicz this week. You know why he's the favorite? Because Jan Blachowicz is never the favorite. Let me go down here and just show you these matchups quickly so you can get an idea. Since late 2017, October 2017, when he fought Devin Clark, he has fought in the UFC 11 times. He's only lost twice. In those 11 fights, he has been the betting underdog 9 times. Odds makers don't like Jan Blachowicz, and they've gotten burned by him time and time again, and they're going to get burned by him again this week. Let me tell you why. Aleksandar Rakic is a striker. He likes to strike. He's got okay power, but really nothing crazy. Decent striking output, but that's about it. He doesn't shoot for a whole lot of takedowns. I know you see the control time here, you see the control time here. These are reversals of positions. He followed Anthony Smith down to the ground there, and also was just manhandling Anthony Smith that night. I don't know what that was about. And if you look at his stats on UFCstats.com, you're going to see a 90% takedown defense, but that's because nobody's trying to take him down. So that stat line could be a little misleading. But what kills me is just the type of fight that he fights. Even DC was saying on the broadcast last week that Rakic has had some snoozers in the octagon, and it's because it's true. Outside of the knockout of Jimmy Manuel, he had the knockout of Devin Clark. This guy's largely been unimpressive. And on top of that, look at the last 4 or 5 guys that he's fought. A shell of Thiago Santos, Anthony Smith, which I don't know what was going on with him that night, loses to Volkan Oezdemir. Poster boy Manuel, as we know, is not that great. Devin Clark, not that great. If we come down here to Jan Blachowicz, the last 5 guys that he fought was Glover Teixeira, who would absolutely run through Rakic. Israel Adesanya, outside of maybe the size discrepancy, because Adesanya would be eye to eye with him, I still think that Adesanya would probably beat him since it would largely be a striking battle. I think Dominic Reyes would touch him up depending on the type of form that Dominic Reyes is on that night. Corey Anderson would pound him into the dirt, no doubt about it. I think that Rakic would beat the middleweight Jacare at this stage in his career. But when you look at these guys side by side, you have to give the striking power advantage, the wrestling advantage, experience, and cardio advantage all to Jan Blachowicz. And I say cardio advantage because we've never seen Rakic in a 4th or 5th round in his entire career. At least when I've looked back, I haven't found anything. And he lost the 3rd round to Volkan Oezdemir, ultimately losing him the fight. And you have to think, is that due to cardio? On top of that, we know that Jan Blachowicz has solid body kicks. Couple that with some takedowns that he might be able to secure. If that's the case and he's able to get both of those parts of his game going, I don't see Aleksandar Rakic winning the 4th or 5th round. And again, odds makers hate Jan Blachowicz, but at the same time, he was nearly a 3-1 favorite against Glover Teixeira after the Israel Adesanya fight. If this fight was made immediately after the Israel Adesanya fight for Blachowicz, he'd be a -400 favorite, and he'd probably be at the very top of the slate. So the pick for me for this fight is Jan Blachowicz by decision, and I do say by decision because although we know he has that Rakic has proven to have a pretty good chin, so I don't know if he's going to be able to chin check him the way that he has some of these guys in the last few years, but I do think that he's going to win based on just bigger moments, wrestling, body kicks, and looking better later in the fight. So we have Katlyn Chookagian. She is 8,600. She's fighting Amanda Ribas this week, who's actually moving up from strawweight to flyweight. But Ribas has done that once before against Paige Van Zandt, but Paige Van Zandt is not even on the same planet as Katlyn Chookagian. I know that there's some debate about this. I don't really know what to go off of, but on Tapology, she's going to be having a 6-inch height advantage and a 2-inch reach advantage, so she's going to have the physical tools to fight the kind of fight that she wants to. She likes to use her footwork to stay on the outside. She normally lands around 20 to 30 strikes per round, but there really isn't that much on them. And against better grapplers, she normally likes to avoid the clinch as best as she can, which is smart. And you might be thinking now, well, she grappled with Jennifer Maia, who's a great grappler. No, she's not. Not in MMA. Just jiu-jitsu competition, sure. But in MMA, she is not that great. She is 4-5 in the UFC with 1 submission over Joanne Wood. I'm not reading too much into the Jennifer Maia being a great grappler in the octagon. But anyway, I think that Chookagian is a smart fighter for sure. But I do think that her skill set is a little bit limited here. I don't think that she's going to be as fast as Ribas. And in a smaller cage, Ribas is going to have some success grappling. That's what I predict. And I see a lot of decisions coming through this week. But from a DraftKings perspective, I'm also looking at matchups. I think this is a winnable fight for the underdog in Amanda Ribas. So the pick for this fight for me is Amanda Ribas by decision. Next at 8,500, we have Virna Jandiroba. She's keeping an eye on me. She's keeping an eye on you all at the same time. She's fighting Angela Hill this week, and this fight is going to go the distance, so take the over. Just like in the fight before, take the over. And for those of you that watched last week, just to give you a quick data update, after last week for the year of 2022, the over round prop, even including 5-round fights for women's MMA, is hitting at over 74%. Do you hear what I'm saying? 74%. There are probably going to be around 125 women's MMA fights in the UFC this year total, so connect the dots. This is easy work. And to go a step further, none of these fights that have gone over in the round props have finished after that point. You can bet the fight goes the distance for slightly better odds. Like, for example, you might have a situation where the line is set at over 2.5 rounds at minus 220. But the fight goes the distance might be at minus 180. And that's important because none of these fights in this sample size, none of that 74% that's been hitting for the year have finished after the round. So if you want to take that fight goes the distance line, it's going to give you better odds. So the fight goes the distance and the over prop are both hitting at 74%. Lay this down every time. I did this last week and went 4 for 4 like a Junior bacon cheeseburger, fries, nuggets, and a drink. You know what I mean? Now, as for this fight, I actually think that Angela Hill is going to find a way to win. She's going to have steadier output, tighter technique, and better cardio. In the UFC, Virna Jandiroba hasn't won a fight by decision, and Hill doesn't get finished often. So if this sees the judges' scorecards, I do favor Angela Hill. Hill has also fought the better competition for a longer period of time, and unfortunately for her, judges hate her. She's lost some fights that she's clearly won. You can look at the Amanda Lemos fight, the Waterson fight, the Claudia Gadelha fight, which was absurd that she lost. But in this matchup, I think it's going to be a little bit more clear cut. I think that she's going to double up Jandiroba on strikes. She's going to land the cleaner strikes, and she's going to fight a smarter game plan overall. Now, obviously, from a DraftKings perspective, Jandiroba has much more finishing upside, and she's probably going to come in pretty low owned this week. So if you do target one side of this fight, I would recommend that you play Virna Jandiroba. But still, early here in the week, I do like Hill to win. My mind could change on this, but the pick for me for this fight is Angela Hill by decision. Split decision. Next at 8,400, we have the menace, Michael Johnson. He is almost a 500 fighter at this point. He's fighting Allan this week. Some fighters have this X factor, right? This thing inside them that helps them find ways to win fights. Michael Johnson has whatever the opposite of that is. He was beating Justin Gaethje, then he gets finished in the second. He was killing Thiago Moises in the first, gets subbed as soon as the second round starts. He was winning convincingly against Josh Emmett, then gets starched at the end of the third round by a big overhand. He's 3-9 in his last 12 fights, so how can we trust him to win another fight? I just cannot. He really doesn't do anything well anymore. He's got okay hand speed, that's what he's known for, but that's about it. Now, he should land more than Patrick, but Patrick could end up winning this fight based on his wrestling, but it's so hard to say that with any kind of confidence because he's 38 years old now. He was out-wrestled by Bobby Green. There's just so many question marks. I can't bet on it. I can't bet on Michael Johnson. I can't bet on Allan Patrick. And I'm sure you feel the same way, and honestly, early in the week, it's hard for me to provide a hard lean on either side of this, so make sure you watch out on Friday for the final picks video. This card is abysmal. Next at 8,300, we have Manuel Torres. He's fighting Frank Camacho this week, and this is a spot that you could feel confident in. Just like Davey Grant, I think that Manuel Torres is going to be able to pick up a knockout in this spot. He's going to be a key piece in our lineups just because Camacho has no chin. He's had some serious issues outside of the cage keeping him out of competition, and he's not really UFC caliber to begin with. On the other side, we've got Manuel Torres, who's extremely dangerous, definitely the more athletic fighter. He's the younger guy with less miles on him. We haven't seen him knocked out time and time again. And I will say that he hasn't fought the best competition up until this point, but you have to ask yourself, is Frank Camacho the best level of competition anyway? Not really. So for that reason, I'm really confident on Torres here at 8,300, and he makes a lot of things work in your lineup. So the pick for me for this fight is Manuel Torres by knockout. And next at 8,200, we have Andrea Lee. She's fighting Vivane Araujo this week, and I like her to win and to score well in this spot. Historically, she scored pretty well on DraftKings. Even in this 3-round loss against Roxanne Modafferi, she still scored 71 points, which is is crazy. That's more points than Rose Namajunas and Carla Esparza scored combined last week. We're both on the cash game lineup that's still dominated. I like her to win this week largely because of her pace. We know that Araujo tends to take rounds off, and that's surely going to lose her the fight in this spot. I think the first round will be super competitive. I think Araujo is going to be able to take Lee down, but I think the second and third round is really where Lee is going to be able to pull away because Araujo is going to eat more shots than she lands like she does historically, and she's not going to be able to get the same kind of wrestling going that she got in the first round. And if she does need to fight Andrea Lee on the feet, I think that she is screwed just because, again, she is eating like, 5.7, almost 6 shots per minute. That's something that you can't keep up. That's something that tires you out and wears on your gas tank, and I think it's going to create huge problems for her and huge opportunities for Andrea Lee. I do think that there's a path to victory for Araujo just being the bigger, stronger girl in this matchup, but at the same time, I'm looking at a situation where Andrea Lee might just be too much with the cardio and the pace. My mind could change later in the week, but for right now, the pick for me for this fight is Andrea Lee by decision. Now, I'll quickly go over the plays at 8,000 and below for you. We're going to save building lineups for the final picks video later in the week. And I just wanted to say to those of you that subscribed over the past couple of weeks, and obviously people that have been subscribed, thank you so much. We were trying to hit 500 to open up the community tab. It takes a little bit for that to open, but we got there. We absolutely smashed it. I think last week alone, we got like 60 subscribers total. So thank you so much. I really, really do appreciate it. And I have some cool things coming for you. Some ideas that I have to improve the content, to make this a little bit more fun. I have some ideas that I'm still ironing out, but there is some cool stuff on the way, I can assure you of that, and I'm excited about it. So quickly, we're looking at Vivane Araujo. Again, I do think that if she can get her wrestling going, she could have a chance here, but she tends to take rounds off, and against somebody like Andrea Lee, who's all action, it's going to be difficult for her to do that and still win the fight. Frank Camacho, I think that he's going to get his jaw spun this week. I'm really not interested. Allan, I mean, if you're looking at something like 9 takedowns, 5 takedowns, you're in a good spot, but at the same time, he could show up the way he did against Bobby Green, where just no output, and that's kind of the issue with Allan. I hope that they come in with a better game plan. He's fighting out of the same gym as Charles Oliveira, so hopefully he's going to have a little bit more hair. Hopefully it's going to be blonde. He'll be illuminated by God, as they say, and he's able to get the win. I just can't bet on Michael Johnson. Overkill Hill, I think that she could win this fight, but at the same time, she's not going to want to take Jandiroba down because we know how dangerous she is on the mat, so that kind of cuts off one path for her. And in a strictly stand-up fight, I mean, we've seen her lose before, whether she's losing or she's just losing on the scorecards. We've seen her take L's before, so it's kind of hard to back her with any confidence, but I do think that she probably ends up winning. Jan Blachowicz, the former champ, I think that he's got the right stuff this week. I'm not that high on Aleksandar Rakic. Maybe I'll jump on board after this, but for right now, I prefer this side of the matchup. Allan Nascimento, whoa, I totally missed Jake Hadley. Let's go back. Jake Hadley at 8,800. White Kong is making his UFC debut this week against Allan Nascimento. I expect him to get the better of Nascimento on the feet, but at the same time, I think that Nascimento's being really underrated in this spot. Nascimento's got a tricky game off his back. It is super slow. I noticed that in his fight against Tagir Ulanbekov, but Tagir Ulanbekov's not the kind of guy to get submitted. Jake Hadley is making his UFC debut, so you're looking at a situation where he might get a slice of humble pie. I know this is a very confident guy, but he's fighting a tricky Allan Nascimento, also coming out of that shoot-to-box Diego Lima camp. They might come in with a good game plan, be able to wrap something up, be able to surprise this guy, especially if he starts going for takedowns. He might leave himself exposed. So I'm really not that high on him this week. I do think that if he wins, he probably scores pretty well because it's likely inside the distance. But I think that Allan Nascimento is a very, very live dog down at 7,400. We'll see what happens. I mean, obviously you don't like his performance against Ulanbekov because he was largely accepting bottom position, thinking that he can work his grappling, but at the same time, if he comes in with a little bit more of an urgent approach, he might be able to surprise Jake Hadley. Ryan Spann is going to have some physical advantages here over Cutelaba. He's definitely going to be the much lower owned fighter of the two, and he's got knockout power. Not crazy knockout power, but he's knocked people out in the UFC before, and he's got those long arms. I believe he fights out of Fortis MMA, so they're probably going to have a good game plan for him. Again, he's just kind of lazy in there, so I don't know if he's going to be able to fight with a wide wild man that is Cutelaba for 15 minutes. But I don't think that he's completely outgunned here either. Candelario, Smolka, I feel similarly about both of these two. I just don't see a path to victory for either of them. And Andre Petrovsky, I feel like he might be the surprise of the night. He might pull something out of the hat with either a big shot on the feet or he's grabbing a submission when Maximov is shooting for a takedown. He does like to jump on guillotines, which if you've been watching, you know I hate that. It's a very low percentage. You don't see too many good grapplers getting caught with it. It happens. It does happen. But at the same time, most good grapplers know to just be patient, work their way out of it, get off onto the opposite side so that their body is across the body of their opponent. There are ways to deal with the guillotine. Looking up is one of them. But the frontal choke package against somebody who is going to be diving for the legs over and over again is something that you like to have in your back pocket. Think Makwan Amirkhani versus Mike Grundy back at UFC London. As soon as Grundy shot for a takedown, Makwan Amirkhani was right there with the anaconda. He caught him, so that could end up happening in this spot as well. And I do think that both of these guys don't have great cardio, so you're looking at a situation where if Petroski is able to get him to the ground, I think that Maximov is probably going to end up accepting the position, and we know that Petroski is going to be raining bombs from the top. So again, I like him right now. My mind could change on this later in the week, but at 6,900 looks like a sleeper. If you have made it this far in the video, thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. Make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel, leave something in the comments, anything, and I will see you later in the week.